everyone, my name is Dr. Kirsten Fulong and I'm here at Pinnacle Chiropractic in the Sarasota and Bradenton area, and I'm here to talk about milestones, especially baby milestones. So don't you wish parenting came with some sort of training manual just like you had in school, some sort of textbook? It can be so hard to know as a parent whether you're doing the right thing for your child. Like, are they on the right track? Am I missing something? Are they hitting their milestones on time? Are they doing the right thing? Are they healthy? Are they behind? Maybe are they delayed? Is this common? Is this normal? There's so many questions that we hear parents asking in our practice every single day. And this is something that you might think to yourself as a parent as you see your child progress through different milestones, through different ages, and all the different things that come with those ages. So we get to see so many kids in our practice, and we're very lucky to do so. And all these kids have different needs, behaviors, and some that may be ahead on their milestones, and then others that may be delayed with their milestones. So sometimes it's super common for kids to be behind with milestones, but we like to question, is that normal for them to be behind on their milestones? And what are the milestones? Neurologically, behaviorally, is this normal neurological development? So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, normal neurological development. And that's what we do every single day in our office, because a lot of moms come in because their mom gut is just yelling at them that something is just not right with their child, but they don't know exactly what. And they're being told by their pediatrician that their child's just going to grow out of it one day. And while that may seem true to that mom, or it may seem apparent in our society that kids just grow out of it, it's actually more common that they grow into different things later on, more complex things. And that root issue doesn't necessarily go away. It doesn't disappear magically. It just transforms into a different issue. So we need to know what should or shouldn't be happening with our children, with different symptoms, different expressions, different behaviors, different sensory things, all these different things that we should be looking at and observing to see if there's any red flags early on. So we have tons of babies that have had difficult births. They suffer with things like torticollis, colic, sleep issues, and these turn into plagiocephaly that around 4 or 5 months old, there's neck restriction where one side of the body is being favored versus the other side. And then mom and dad are looking into helmets for them and trying to fix this issue when this is something that could have been taken care of early on so it didn't turn into a bigger issue for them. Meanwhile, this baby is almost ready to crawl, and then their baby's neurologically stuck. So basically they're not able to crawl properly because they're favoring one side of their body. So then sitting up, crawling, and other milestones are affected since things are not neurologically straight to begin with. So this has been an issue that they've been dealing with since birth. It's not just all of a sudden miraculously at 5 or 6 months old. This is what's happening from the birth process. So then we start to see babies that crawl in kind of a wonky way. They might lift one knee up. They might have one shoulder up higher than the other. They might butt scoot even, or not even crawl properly. Or they'll just even skip crawling altogether, which is a big red flag in our office. So this is really big for them because this impacts their brain development. We need symmetrical and coordinated movement for the right and the left hemispheres of the brain to develop properly. This is where we look at movement as a window into the brain and what the brain is doing. And there's actually a lot of really awesome books on this. My favorite is Disconnected Kids by Dr. Robert Melillo. We are always recommending this book to parents in our office because their movement at an early age is a window into what their brain is doing. So we've broken it down into development into 2 main phases of baby development. So phase 1 is the 3 main functions: eating, sleeping, and pooping. We need these babies to be doing all these 3 things really well. And while if they're not doing any of these well or just one of them well, this can affect things later on. This is where we start to look at movement too, so symmetry. So if I notice a baby is favoring a side of their head, or if their shoulder's kind of up here, their spine is already curving to one side, they only like to look one way, things are already looking kind of stuck. This can also be apparent for parents as well when they're looking at their child. So this is why the first 4 months for babies is so important to make sure they're doing those 3 things really well. And then this is where we come in if they're not doing those things, if they're not eliminating their toxins, if they're not sleeping well, and if they're not eating well. This is where we can help them with that latch, help them with that breastfeeding, help them with eliminating their toxins properly, all the things that happen with babies. Then when you hit 4 to 8 months, this is where the move part comes in. This is where babies start to roll over both ways, hopefully front to back and back to front. They start to sit up on their own, gain some more core balance, start to do things sitting and exploring their environment from a different level. This is where they start to eat foods, and then they start to crawl and then experience their environment. If all of that goes well and smooth, we see them hitting all of these milestones with ease. This will then lead to a healthy phase 2. So all of that was phase 1, that first 4 to 8 months of their life. So oftentimes we as parents will get to stage 2 or phase 2, where we get into speech, sensory, learning, interacting, social, play, all these different more complex things that kids get to. And if we notice something is off with any of these things socially or sensory wise, this leads us back to something that was off development wise in phase 1. So since the brain works in a building upon foundations in an orderly manner, if one of the primary functions is altered or off, this can impact the more complex functions later on, like the social, the sensory, the play, the neurological development where they're expressing themselves in a verbal way. So what are the signs that we often see as parents and as pediatric chiropractors? The first struggle happens typically in the birth process. So we go all the way back. So we have kids coming into our office at 5, 6, 7 years old with ADHD tendencies, sensory issues, clothing textures are off, they're having frequent tantrums and meltdowns, all these different things. But we actually ask mom about her preconception journey, about her conception journey. We ask her about what birth was like for her. How stressful was it? Was there a lot of physical stress? So C-section births, induction, manual assistance to get that baby out of the birth canal. Birth can be super stressful for mom and baby, especially if that's their first experience into the world. So oftentimes the biggest impact early on is on that upper head and neck area. That's where we see it the most. Where this is where our latch and our swallow reflex originate, our vagus nerve function that comes from up here, goes down through the brainstem all the way into the gut area where we regulate digestion, immune system function, and all of that good stuff. So this area up here is where the cerebellum originates. So this is where the brainstem and the cerebellum are, and that is what controls movement. So that's that second stage and phase that I was talking about. So this is all the things that happen in that 4 to 8 month period where that baby is starting to move. So when there is stress early on in this upper neck and head area, this messes up that milestone, that neurological milestone sequence of events. They are the baby that is gassy, they can't sleep well, they can't poop well, and then that turns into the baby that crawls a little funny, is moving a little bit funny, kind of likes this side versus that side, and then they start to be a little bit delayed with their motor milestones in that 4 to 8 month period. That then turns into the toddler that has speech delays, troubles with expressing themselves, especially emotionally, troubles with some textures, sensory seeking behavior where they have to touch everything in the room to actually understand it, frequent tantrums with hyperactivity at night when they should be sleeping and resting. So this affects things socially and educationally later on, and that's where things are much more obvious when they enter the school system, and that's where they're being compared to other kids. So a lot of times that alarm system for that parent doesn't really go off until they're in school, and that's when we're having to go back and do the basic things over again. So this is why we build upon the basics, because the basics turn into more complex things later on. And I know this sounds like I'm repeating myself a lot, but I really want you guys to get that message as parents. So we look back before we can move forward, because neurological development starts actually in the womb. This is where we have to start being aware of all the normal neurological milestones and that they're hitting them in order and ideally on time, so that these can happen to facilitate more ease later on for them in their brain. So we need to address these functions in phase 1 before they turn into issues in phase 2. So these kids may seem like they'll just grow out of it, but that mom gut is definitely sending you alarms telling you that something is off with your child. And if you're a mom, you know that your mom gut is telling you something. So this is where we have to be more aware of what we're noticing in kids early on before it turns into more complex issues. A really awesome quote I love from Dr. Bruce Lipton is, "You can't be in growth and protection at the same time." And so those are the two sides of your nervous system. So you can't be in that growth and healing and resting and digesting mode when you're in that protection mode, where you're in that fight or flight, adrenaline, stress response mode. So we can't be in both at the same time. When we measure this in our office, we can see where these kids are laying in that growth versus protection mode. And most of the kids that we're seeing with those issues that I mentioned earlier are in that protection mode. So that's actually limiting them from hitting those milestones on time. When you're in protection mode, your body isn't growing and healing properly. And so oftentimes that's why we'll look at sleep and all these different factors with kiddos in our office. So these babies come into our office with stress from the birth process. They're in protection mode. We're releasing that from their bodies. We're releasing that stress so that they can go back into that resting, digesting, and healing and growth mode, because babies need to grow into healthy kids and then into healthy adults. So this is what we look at all the time in our office. We ideally like to address it as soon as possible before it turns into a more complex issue. But if any of this resonated with you or rang a bell for you, or if your mom gut is going off right now, just let us know if we can find anyone near you that can help your child. Again, like I said earlier, we are a pediatric and prenatal focused office in the Sarasota and Bradenton area, but there are a ton of docs like us everywhere around the country. And you can always message us or call us to help find someone near you that can help your child get from that protection mode into that growth and healing mode. Thank you so much.